A man in his 50s has been stabbed and seriously wounded in a suspected terror attack near the Jaffa Gate entrance to Jerusalem's Old City. This according to both local police and medics on the scene. The Magen David Adom Rescue and Ambulance Service says that it's treating the man at the scene. The suspect, who is said to have been 17 years old and from East Jerusalem, is alleged to have been arrested. Here with me in studio is our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osaran. Ariel, developing and breaking news. What more do we know coming out at this hour?
Right, but yeah, not much to what you just reported. We're talking about a man in his 50s who's in serious condition after being stabbed or hacked by a cleaver. As we can see, there's videos of the incident already circulating on social media. The Israeli man was taken to hospital Hadassah Har HaTzofim, where he's being treated there. He's in stable condition. 2 additional Israelis are suffering from shock. Now, according to the police statement, the stabber, the suspect, was apprehended on site, and I would imagine he's being taken to interrogation in order to understand what his motive in this particular incident was.
How unusual is this that this is happening not only in Jerusalem but at an area that sees a fortune of human traffic as well as tourists, considering the fact that in the last couple of weeks/months we've seen a lot of these terror attacks taking place within the West Bank itself? Indeed.
The old city in Jerusalem, mainly the Damascus Gate, which is very nearby, has a constant, very robust security presence by Israeli police. And given the latest uptick in attacks across, they were mainly in the West Bank, but there's always alerts for potential attacks in the Jerusalem area. The fact we don't see many of these attacks taking place in Jaffa Gate, usually more in the Damascus Gate, but the proximity of both of them are very close, so that's insignificant. What was interesting is that videos emerging from the scene show Police Commissioner Kobi Shabtai rushing to on the scene moments after the incident took place. And so this appears, not only did this incident, was it stopped with the apprehension of the suspect, but it is appear to be that the Israeli police already has control over the scene, and obviously an investigation has been launched to try and understand the motive for this attack.
And Ariel, stay with us. I do want to cross now to Zoom, where I'm bringing in Yaakov Lapin, a military and strategic affairs analyst for the Jewish News Syndicate and the Miriam Institute, who joins me now from Rehovot, Israel. Tell us just a little bit about how likely this was that it went down, not only in Jerusalem, but also after the IDF supposedly arrested or made arrests today in the West Bank, in Jenin.
I think that, undoubtedly we're in the middle of a terrorism surge. It's been going on for over a year and a half, and now it's picking up pace even further. I would draw attention to the viewers to the stabbing attack that occurred in Jerusalem 2 days ago, in which a Palestinian woman attempted to stab a border police officer. And this looks to me like some sort of copycat attack, and this is the risk with this kind of lone wolf terrorism. One incident leads to another, and then this chain reaction happens, and it's not happening in isolation. It's being accompanied by and fueled by incitement to terrorism, incitement to this kind of violence. It's coming primarily from Hamas, from Palestinian Islamic Jihad, from the social media outlets, and also from Iran. So they're creating this atmosphere, and then they're enabling these lone wolf terrorists to really decide on their own to carry out these attacks, as opposed to the more organized kinds of terrorism that we're seeing in the West Bank.
Yaakov, I want to touch a little bit on what you mentioned, this possibly being a copycat attack of a stabbing attempts that occurred in Jerusalem within the Old City. Now, the visuals that came out of that showed the Israeli Defense Guard, or at least the border policeman, kicking the woman who attempted to stab him. And that video has made the rounds on international media, saying, look how terrible the IDF treatment is toward the Palestinians in the Old City of Jerusalem. How is the international media likely going to be playing out what at the moment is, as Ariel mentioned, this taking place at Jaffa Gate, not necessarily Damascus Gate? We have to remember Jaffa Gate is right off that entrance to Mamilla. It is an incredibly popular tourist area that people are entering the Old City. How is the international media going to be covering this?
I can't speak for how the international media will be covering it. I'm not sure. But I think, attempts to portray this self-defense action by the border police officer as anything other than self-defense action is frankly ridiculous because he didn't use his firearm, which he well could have, and instead resorted to non-lethal self-defense using his own body, which actually ended up sparing the life of the attacker. So to frame it in any other way, I think is frankly preposterous because, you know, in any other country, I think a security force member who would be attacked with a knife, you know, I think I'd be fairly confident in saying that most of those incidents would be ending with a shooting. You know, ultimately, at the end of the day, the knife aspect of terrorism is its own kind of challenge. We had a knife escalation. Some called it a knife intifada in 2015 and 2016. It took almost 2 years for the defense establishment to extinguish that surge, and it created its own kind of challenge. Now we're dealing with something actually that's much more widespread, has much more casualties. We're already past 36 casualties this year of terrorism, and that's more than we had the whole of last year. And now we're seeing sort of knife terrorism as one more aspect in a plethora of attacks, drive-by shootings, IEDs, some of which are coming from Iran. So this is a more serious wave than what we had back then. And now, you know, we're seeing a return as well of this knife lone wolf terrorist phenomena.
Absolutely, Yaakov. And there are reports coming out now that the knife that was used was in fact a butcher's knife, something that would be found in a kitchen or literally a butchery that was being used to stab Israeli citizens or at least passerbyers in that area. And as you mentioned, this being obviously something that comes back from 2015, 2016 in terms of the knife attacks, there's been a fortune of guns and weaponry coming into the West Bank. Could this be seen as something as a very different sort of thing from the Iranian sort of egged on attacks that we're seeing in the West Bank?
I think it's all part of one overall phenomenon, which is terrorism, Palestinian terrorism, which is being fueled from multiple directions. The difference really is, as you've said, now that guns are so much more available today in 2023 than they were in 2016, whereas in the past, a would-be terrorists had fewer options to actualize their intentions. Today, it's so much easier for them to buy a firearm from the black market, whether it's produced locally in the West Bank, whether it's smuggled in from Jordan, or whether it's stolen from an IDF base in southern Israel. There's just so much more guns out in the streets of the West Bank and in East Jerusalem, for that matter. And that's, I think, what really makes this wave so much more lethal, is the availability of firearms, and firearms are going to be more lethal than knives. As dangerous and horrible as knife attacks are, firearms are simply more lethal. And I think that's really one of the main differences we're seeing in this wave. But that doesn't preclude, as we've just seen this week, the use of knives. These are really unorganized sort of, lone wolf attackers acting on incitement, and they're basically pulling up the easiest thing that they can, which is a knife so readily available in every kitchen. The next step up from that is a vehicle attack. Everybody has access to knives and vehicles, and that's what makes these weapons of choice for terrorists that are not part of any cell, organized cell, and who simply want to act on the incitement that they've been exposed to.
Yaakov Lapin, a military and strategic affairs analyst for both the Jewish News Syndicate and the Miriam Institute, joining me from Rehovot, Israel, on this developing story. Thank you very much. We are going to be going out for a short break, but I do want to recap our developing and breaking news story. A man in his 50s has been stabbed and seriously wounded in a suspected terror attack near the Jaffa Gate entrance to Jerusalem's Old City, a real vibrant entrance to the city that is used not just by Israeli and Arab citizens alike, but also many tourists. Now, according to both local police and medics on the scene, the man that was wounded is seeking medical treatment. The Magen David Adom ambulance service is there. The suspect, who is said to be 17 years old and from East Jerusalem, is alleged to have been arrested by police forces on the scene. We'll have all this and more updates coming straight after this 2-minute break. Don't go anywhere. You're watching a developing and breaking news edition of the I-24 News Desk.